Mark Twain Selected Works. The Private History of a Campaign That Failed, Part 4, December 1885. The man was not in uniform and was not armed. He was a stranger in the country. That was all we ever found out about him. The thought of him got to preying on me every night. I could not get rid of it. I could not drive it away. The taking of that unoffending life seemed such a wanton thing, and it seemed an epitome of war, that all war must just be the killing of strangers against whom you feel no personal animosity, strangers who, in other circumstances, you would help if you found them in trouble, and who would help you if you needed it. My campaign was spoiled. It seemed to me that I was not rightly equipped for this awful business, that war was intended for men and I for a child's nurse. I resolved to retire from this avocation of sham soldiership while I could retain some remnant of my self-respect. These morbid thoughts clung to me against reason, for at the bottom I did not believe I had touched this man. The law of probabilities decreed me guiltless of his blood, for in all my small experiences with guns I had not hit anything I had tried to hit, and I knew I had done my best to hit him. Yet there was no solace in the thought. Against a diseased imagination, demonstration goes for nothing. The rest of my war experience was of a piece with what I have already told of it. We kept monotonously falling back upon one camp or another and eating up the farmers and their families. They ought to have shot us. On the contrary, they were as hospitably kind and courteous to us as if we had deserved it. In one of these camps, we found Ab Grimes, an upper Mississippi pilot who afterwards became famous as a daredevil rebel spy, whose career bristled with desperate adventures. The loom and style of his comrades suggested that they had not come to the war to play, and their deeds made good the conjecture later. They were fine horsemen and good revolver shots, but their favorite arm was the lasso. Each had one at his pommel and could snatch a man out of his saddle with it on a full gallop at any reasonable distance. In another camp, the chief was a fierce and profane old blacksmith of 60, and he had furnished his 20 recruits with gigantic homemade bowie knives to be swung with 2 hands like the machetes of the Isthmus. It was a grisly spectacle to see that earnest band practicing their murderous cuts and slashes under the eye of that remorseless old fanatic. The last camp which we fell back on was in a hollow near the village of Florida, where I was born in Monroe County. Here we were warned one day that a Union colonel was sweeping down on us with a whole regiment at his heels. This looked decidedly serious. Our boys went apart and consulted. Then we went back and told the other companies present that the war was a disappointment to us and we were going to disband. They were getting ready themselves to fall back on some place or another, and we were only waiting for General Tom Harris, who was expected to arrive at any moment. So they tried to persuade us to wait a little while, but the majority of us said no, we were accustomed to falling back and didn't need any of Harris's help. We could get along perfectly without him and save time, too. So about half of our 15 men, including myself, mounted and left on the instant. The others yielded to persuasion and stayed through the war. An hour later, we met General Harris on the road with 2 or 3 people in his company, his staff probably, but we could not tell. None of them were in uniform. Uniforms had not come into vogue among us yet. Harris ordered us back, but we told him there was a Union colonel coming with a whole regiment in his wake, and it looked as if there was going to be a disturbance. So we had concluded to go home. He raged a little bit, but it was of no use. Our minds were made up. We had done our share, killed one man, exterminated one army, such as it was. Let him go and kill the rest, and that would end the war. I did not see that brisk young general again until last year. He was wearing white hair and whiskers. In time, I came to learn that the Union colonel whose coming frightened me out of the war and crippled the Southern cause to that extent, General Grant. I came within a few hours of seeing him when he was as unknown as I was myself. At a time when anybody could have said, "Grant? Ulysses S. Grant." I do not remember hearing the name before. It seems difficult to realize there was once a time when such a remark could be rashly made, but there was. I was within a few miles of the place and the occasion, too, though proceeding in the other direction. The thoughtful will not throw this war paper of mine lightly aside as being valueless. It has this value. It is not an unfair picture of what went on in many a militia camp in the first months of the rebellion, when the green recruits were without discipline, without the steadying and heartening influence of trained leaders, when all their circumstances were new and strange and charged with exaggerated terrors, and before the invaluable experience of actual collision in the field had turned them from rabbits into soldiers. If this side of the picture of that early day has not before been put into history, then history has been to that degree incomplete, for it had and has its rightful place there. There was more Bull Run material scattered through the early camps of this country than exhibited itself at Bull Run, and yet it learned its trade presently and helped to fight the great battles later. I could have become a soldier myself if I had waited. I had got part of it learned. I knew more about retreating than the man that invented retreat.